There are seasons in life when nothing seems to move, no matter how deeply you want it to. You water the ground, you wait, you hope, yet the days pass quietly, offering no visible reward. In those moments, doubt whispers that patience is wasted time, that stillness means failure, that progress should always be loud and fast. But what if the slow moments are not empty at all? What if they are doing the most important work of all? This story is about the kind of strength that grows unseen, a story about discipline without force, courage without noise, and a journey where letting go becomes the beginning of peace. In a small town just beyond the edge of the fields, there lived a man who spent his life tending what others overlooked gardener, who believed that time itself was a teacher. The gardener woke each morning before the sun made its decision to rise, not because he was forced to, but because his body had learned the rhythm of waiting. The small town still slept as he stepped outside, the air cool and unmoving, the sky painted in shades of quiet blue. His garden lay just beyond his modest home, a stretch of earth many people passed without noticing. To him, it was a living conversation, one that spoke slowly, in seasons rather than sentences. He had spent most of his life here, hands in the soil, back bent under the patient weight of time. While others chased faster dreams in distant places, he chose repetition, dig, plant, water, wait, not because it was easy, but because it made sense. Growth, he believed, could not be rushed without being broken. Patience was not passivity, it was discipline in disguise. The gardener believed that if he showed up every day, the earth would eventually respond. And often it did. Seeds cracked open, green tips pushed through dark soil. But between those moments were long stretches of nothing days, where the ground looked unchanged, silent, indifferent. Those were the days that tested him most. Inside his calm routine lived a quieter truth. Though he never spoke of it, he wanted proof. Proof that the waiting mattered. Proof that a life spent tending unseen growth was not a life overlooked. When townspeople complimented his work in passing, he smiled politely, but their words never stayed long. Validation, like rain, came unpredictably. Still, every morning, he returned to the garden. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if speed might offend the process. Each plant received the same care, regardless of how quickly it showed results. In that discipline, he found a fragile peace. And yet, beneath the surface of his steady hands and measured breath, a question waited, one he had never allowed himself to ask. What if patience wasn't enough? Change arrived the way it often does in quiet lives, not suddenly, but gradually enough that it could be mistaken for coincidence. The soil began to respond with more certainty. Leaves grew fuller. Colors deepened. The garden no longer whispered. It spoke with confidence. Rows once bare now carried weight, and the air around them held the faint sweetness of life taking shape. The gardener noticed, of course, he always did, but this time the signs were undeniable. What had been nurtured in silence was becoming visible. Passersby slowed their steps. Some stopped. A few asked questions. How long did this take? They wondered aloud, surprised that such beauty had grown where they once saw nothing. He answered simply, time, he would say, and discipline. But he rarely spoke the second word. Each morning, his movements felt lighter. The same routine, watering, pruning, checking the soil, now carried a quiet satisfaction. patience was no longer just a belief. It felt rewarded. The waiting had produced something real, something others could see. And with that visibility came a new feeling he had not prepared for. Pride. It wasn't loud or arrogant. It settled gently, like morning dew. He stood a little taller. He lingered longer over the healthiest plants. In his mind, effort and outcome finally felt aligned. This, he thought, was proof. Proof that discipline always pays. Proof that endurance guarantees success. Soon, people from nearby towns came to see the garden. Some praised his commitment. Others asked for advice, hoping to replicate his results quickly. He shared what he knew, but noticed their impatience. They wanted shortcuts. He had none to give. Yet even as he cautioned them to wait, a subtle shift occurred within him. He began measuring days by progress instead of presence. He watched more closely for results. The garden had become not just a practice, but a reflection of his worth. Without realizing it, his patience had quietly tied itself to expectation. An expectation, though gentle at first, carries weight. He did not notice the tension growing beneath his calm, nor how deeply his sense of purpose had become rooted in what the garden produced with her, than the act of tending itself. The rise felt steady, secure, deserved, but seasons, as the earth knows, are never permanent. The season changed without asking permission. One morning, the sky arrived heavier than usual, clouds pressing low as if carrying an unspoken warning. The gardener stood at the edge of his land, sensing something unfamiliar in the air. It wasn't fear not yet, but a quiet unease, the kind you feel before realizing what you're about to lose. The storm came quickly. Rain fell hard, unrelenting, flattening leaves that had taken months to rise. Wind tore through the rows with careless force, snapping stems, uprooting what had been carefully anchored. By nightfall, the garden no longer looked like something nurtured. It looked like something punished. He returned the next morning to silence. Mud clung to his boots as he walked the rows, his hands hovering uselessly above broken growth. The vibrant greens had dulled. Flowers lay scattered like forgotten promises. What once felt alive now felt fragile, defeated. Years of discipline had not protected him. Patience had not negotiated mercy. In the days that followed, the damage revealed itself, slowly, cruelly. Roots rotted beneath the surface. Crops failed to recover. Effort, once so visible, now seemed erased. People stopped coming. Compliments faded. The garden no longer spoke. The gardener worked anyway. Harder, longer. He tried to fix what could not be undone. Each broken plant felt personal, as if the earth had turned against him. His pride collapsed into confusion. If patience had brought success before, why had it failed him now? At night, he lay awake, replaying every decision. Had he waited too long? Not long enough. Should he have done more? The questions circled endlessly, offering no comfort. The garden had been his proof, purpose, of worth, of meaning, and now it was gone. Failure settled into his chest, heavy and unmoving. Not the kind that teaches quickly, but the kind that lingers. The kind that makes you doubt the very beliefs that once carried you forward. For the first time in his life, the gardener considered walking away, because when patience loses its reward, it can feel indistinguishable from loss. he did not leave the garden, but he no longer truly stood within it either. Each morning, the gardener returned, out of habit rather than hope. His hands moved automatically, repeating motions that once carried meaning. He tilled soil that no longer trusted him. He pruned what was already dead. Discipline remained, but its spirit was gone. What once felt like devotion now felt like penance. He refused to accept the loss. Instead of grieving, he negotiated with the past. If he worked harder, maybe time would reverse itself. If he repeated the same routines with greater force, maybe the earth would remember who he used to be. Patience, in his mind, had become endurance without purpose. He replayed the storm endlessly. Every choice became a potential mistake. Every failure felt like evidence of his own inadequacy. The garden had been his identity, and without its success, he felt undefined. Letting go felt like betrayal, so he clung tighter. Days blurred together. The seasons moved forward, but he did not. Seeds went unplanted because he feared wasting them. New growth was ignored because it reminded him of what he lost. He stood frozen between what was and what could be. People noticed the change. They asked fewer questions. Some offered quiet sympathy, which he avoided. He did not want comfort. Comfort implied acceptance, and acceptance felt like surrender. Inside, guilt took root. Perhaps patience had limits. Perhaps discipline was meaningless without control. He blamed himself for trusting time too much, for believing effort alone was enough. His inner world grew narrow, crowded with regret and unanswered questions. The garden mirrored him now, overworked, undernurtured, stuck in survival. In refusing to release the past, he had stopped making room for the future. Yet he told himself this was loyalty, that staying was strength, but strength, when stripped of flexibility, becomes something else entirely. And beneath his rigid devotion, a quiet exhaustion waited, one that no amount of effort could outrun. The encounter happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that carries no expectations. The gardener was walking the far edge of his land when he noticed movement beyond the fence, a small patch of soil he had never claimed, never tended. There, crouched close to the ground, was a child, no older than 10, hands covered in dirt, carefully pressing seeds into uneven earth. The sight puzzled him. That land was poor, rocky, unforgiving. He had dismissed it years ago as unworkable. Nothing grows there, he said, not unkindly, but with certainty. The child looked up, unbothered. Not yet, they replied. The gardener paused. The simplicity of the answer unsettled him. He watched as the child continued working, humming softly, unhurried by outcome. There was no careful measurement, no visible technically attention. What if it fails? He asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. The child shrugged. Then I'll learn where not to plant next time. There was no bitterness in the words, no weight, just truth, spoken plainly. The gardener felt something loosen inside him. He realized how long it had been since he had spoken about failure without resentment. To the child, failure was not a verdict, it was information. Growth was not proof of worth. It was part of a conversation. He stayed longer than he intended, watching the small hands press hope into ground that owed them nothing. The child did not rush, did not expect, did not cling. Before leaving, the gardener asked, "Why do you keep planting there?" The child smiled. Because waiting doesn't feel heavy when you're not asking the ground to be something it isn't yet. The words stayed with him long after the child was gone, not as instruction, but as a mirror. For the first time since the storm, he saw his patience clearly, not as something broken, but as something burdened by expectation. That afternoon, the garden felt quieter than usual. But the silence no longer accused him. It invited him to listen. Change did not arrive with certainty. It arrived with permission. The gardener did not wake the next morning with a plan or a renewed sense of confidence. What he woke with was softer a willingness to release the weight he had been carrying. He returned to the garden, not to repair the past, but to meet the present as it was. He began by clearing space. Not everything, just enough. Dead plants were removed without resentment. The soil was turned gently, not aggressively, as if he were listening rather than correcting. For the first time in a long while, his hands moved without urgency. He planted fewer seeds, chose them carefully, not where success was guaranteed, but where the soil felt ready. When doubt surfaced, he did not argue with it. He acknowledged it and continued anyway. Discipline returned, but this time it was rooted in humility. Some days, nothing seemed to happen, and surprisingly, that no longer frightened him. Waiting no longer demanded proof. It became a practice, again quiet, honest, forgiving. The gardener learned to rest without guilt, to trust without bargaining. He noticed small things he had overlooked before. The way sunlight shifted across the ground, the sound of wind moving through unfinished rows. Growth, he realized, had never stopped. He had simply been too focused on outcomes to notice its quieter forms. Failure no longer felt like an erasure. It felt like part of the landscape, a teacher, not a judge. As weeks passed, signs of life returned, not dramatically, but faithfully. A sprout here, a leaf there. Nothing extraordinary. And yet, everything felt different. He did not measure progress by height or color, but by peace. The garden was becoming a place of healing rather than validation. And in letting go of control, he felt strength return, the rigid kind, but the kind that bends without breaking. For the first time, patience felt light, and that lightness, he sensed, was the beginning of something new. The garden grew again, but it did so without ceremony. There were no crowds this time, no comparisons, no urgency to be seen. The plants rose at their own pace, uneven and imperfect, shaped by weather rather than expectation, and the gardener welcomed them as they were. He moved through the rows with a presence he had not known before. Each task, watering, pruning, waiting, felt complete in itself. Purpose was no longer postponed until results appeared. It lived in the doing, in the showing up, in the quiet agreement between effort and time. When people eventually returned, drawn by the subtle beauty of the place, he greeted them kindly, but without attachment. Praise no longer anchored him, neither did silence. The garden was no longer proof of his worth, it was a reflection of his relationship with patience. He often visited the far patch of land where the child had planted. Some seeds had grown, others had not, and yet the space felt alive. Not because everything succeeded, but because nothing was forced. He smiled at the thought. The gardener had learned that discipline without flexibility becomes fear, that patience without peace becomes waiting with clenched hands, and that letting go is not the opposite of caring, it is what allows care to breathe in the early mornings. As sunlight touched the soil, he felt a quiet gratitude, not for what the garden produced, but for what it had taught him. Failure had softened him, waiting had refined him, and in releasing his need for certainty, he had found balance. The garden would change again. He knew that now. Seasons always do. But he also knew something else. He would not disappear when they did. Strength, he realized, was not built by holding on. It was revealed when you learn how to stay present while letting go. And so, this story gently returns to you, because at some point in life, we all become gardeners tending dreams, relationships, healing, or hope, waiting for something to grow. And when it doesn't arrive on time, we assume we've failed. But this story reminds us that growth is not always visible, and patience is not measured by outcomes. Here are the quiet lessons this journey leaves behind. Patience is not passive. It is discipline practiced without demand. Failure does not erase your effort. It reshapes your understanding. Letting go is not giving up, is making space for peace. Discipline becomes strength only when paired with compassion. Waiting feels heavy only when you tie it to expectation. Purpose is found in presence, not proof. Healing begins when you stop arguing with time. If you are in a season where nothing seems to be moving, remember this: the soil is still working, even when you cannot see it. Your journey is not delayed, is unfolding. So continue showing up. Continue planting with care. Continue trusting that rebirth does not announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly through consistency, courage, and gentle persistence. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to share it with someone who may be waiting too. Like the video if it brought you peace, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we are never growing alone, because sometimes the quietest seasons are preparing the strongest transformations.